Hi, this is Ted Burns, and I want to welcome you to our next episode for our RADVOCACY Podcast hosted by RADPAC. And today's a real special treat because this is a guest that really needs very little to no introduction. She's everywhere in the radiology space. She's everywhere on the social media platform space. And if you follow the NFL at all, she's everywhere in the NFL as well, and we'll get into that later in the episode. So I want to welcome Dr. Amy Patel, who is the chair of the Radiology Advocacy Network, and she's also just newly named as the chair of RADPAC. So Dr. Patel.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So how are you doing? We're here at RSNA Live, and it's a little bit of a cluster because we're all running around going from meeting to meeting and trying to figure out technologies and everything else as we're doing this podcast. How's your experience been so far here?
It's been great. RSNA is one of my favorite meetings, but it's very busy, as you alluded to, and technology sometimes is not our friend, but it's been great so far. I'm so excited that we're in person and we all get to reconnect. The meeting is something very special, and especially we have such a warm and loving community in radiology, and just seeing our colleagues and the camaraderie, you just can't beat that.
Totally agree. And good food and really good restaurants and a little bit of shopping in there too. So we always start out with our guests, even though I think so many know you from all that you do in radiology, but probably not many know about your journey in training, going to med school and then on to your radiology residency and then your fellowship and all that. So can you walk us through that experience first?
Sure. So I was really fortunate. I did the 6-year medical program at the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Medicine. So I went to medical school. I started when I was 18 years old, so I was pretty young. And then after that, I did my intern year in internal medicine at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. I then did a diagnostic radiology residency at the University of Kansas in Wichita. I did a 1-year breast imaging fellowship at Mallinckrodt Institute of Radiology at Washington University in St. Louis. And then after that, I ended up going out to Boston, Massachusetts, where I was on faculty at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. And then I actually came back to the Kansas City area to practice in 2018 at a practice called Alliance Radiology. Our division's at Liberty Hospital, where I serve as the medical director of our breast care center, our breast section, an assistant professor of radiology at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. So I've kind of been all over. My love of advocacy started as a resident. My first involvement in advocacy in radiology was at the ACR annual meeting. I attended as a first-year resident, and I kind of worked my way up, and I never looked back.
That's great. And obviously your roots are very strong to the Kansas City area, which I know you're very proud of. And you started to touch on this a little bit about how you got involved in advocacy. And I know that's kind of been your calling card. You're involved in so many different things in the radiology space, but really advocacy is the one that you've really stood out probably the most in so many people's eyes. And so in addition to your reference already about how you got involved, but I believe you did the Rutherford Fellowship with us in DC. Do you want to talk about that? Maybe how that was even more reason to get you kind of hooked into what we do?
Sure. So as I previously touched upon, I got involved in the ACR as a first-year resident. And from there, I got involved in the ACR Resident Fellow Section Executive Committee, where I served as secretary. And then after I served as secretary, I had this great opportunity to serve on the RADPAC board as a resident representative. And that really helped open my eyes. But in addition to that, I was very fortunate to be chosen as one of the Rutherford Levante Government Relations Fellows my senior year of residency. And I spent a week in Washington, D.C. with our ACRA government relations team, just learning about all the legislative and regulatory processes that we encounter in the field of radiology, attending a lot of fundraising events, meeting members of Congress, spending time with members of Congress, particularly in the area where I was doing my residency in Kansas. So I had just a really great exposure. It was quite a whirlwind, a 1-week fellowship, but it really opened my eyes to a side of radiology and medicine that is arguably just as important as our clinical day-to-day. And so, for me, getting involved early was important. I stress that to trainees and young radiologists that the earlier you can get involved in advocacy endeavors, the better, because these issues are very significantly going to affect your practice. So the earlier you can get involved, the better.
So as chair of RAN and chair of RADPAC, in years past, we've had, RAN was kind of its own silo, then RADPAC kind of was doing its own thing. We're now trying to get a little bit more synergy between the two. But what would be your one big goal for RAN and one big goal for RADPAC, let's say in the next year or 2 years that you're chair for both?
Sure. So my goal now is I'm, very fortunate now that I'm chairing both grassroots advocacy and the PAC. And, historically, we've had these three branches of our ACRA government relations where we've got, RADPAC, RAN, and state GR. Well, particularly RADPAC and RAN, there's so many things that happen between both entities that really need synergism. So, for example, when you have a call to action that's sent to your email from the Radiology Advocacy Network, where we're sending emails to our federal elected officials to sponsor critical pieces of radiology legislation, or particularly recently to try to stave off more Medicare cuts. It's important that we respond to these calls to action, but at the same time, you think about, well, these federal elected officials, why are they going to vote pro radiology legislation? Well, A, hopefully that they actually believe in the issues that we are advocating for, but B, they're going to need something from us, and that's going to be some sort of contribution to help with their campaign. So, a lot of this really does come hand in hand. So it's great to respond to the calls to action. It's great to be involved, but it's also just as equally important to contribute to our PAC and essentially the future of radiology. That is how things get done in Washington, whether we like it or not. And if we want to make sure that our patients are receiving fair and equitable access and that we are being fairly reimbursed for the services we provide, we're going to have to really have that concept sink in, that we need to be just as equally involved in RAN as in RADPAC. So one of my goals is really expanding, our tent first to all radiologists, regardless of career type, private practice, academic, teleradiology, the list goes on. So A, I want to expand our tent of those getting involved in advocacy endeavors. But then the next step is that if you're involved with RAN, I really want you to be involved in RADPAC. And we need to do a better job of communicating to our profession how those two work so critically hand in hand and why it's important to get involved with both.
Yeah, I think that's such a spot on answer. And I think going back to your example with the call to action, obviously it takes more than just one thing to move the needle. And if you get a lot of people responding to a call to action to a congressional office, oh, and by the way, we have a relationship with that congressional office because of RADPAC, we're already kind of on the front of their minds as it is. And then they see a buzz from the constituents back in their district doing these call to actions, and it's like a great twofer. So that's really true, and I think that's something that we're both looking forward to working on. You've done a lot of things in the advocacy space. You've had a lot of accomplishments already, state level, including what would say for you is your biggest accomplishment from an advocacy perspective?
Well, I've really been blessed to be successful in the advocacy space, but I would say that specifically I feel that one of my biggest achievements thus far was us in the state of Missouri passing very critical breast imaging legislation both in 2018 and 2020. In 2018, we were able to pass 3D mammography screening coverage legislation annually beginning at the age of 40. Prior to 2018, the existing legislation had not been amended since 1992 that only required insurance coverage every other year beginning at age 50 for 2D mammography. So bringing us into the 21st century was incredible. Annual screening mammography beginning at age 40, both 2D and 3D in average risk women. But then in 2020, we took it a step further to pass high-risk breast imaging legislation in accordance to the American College of Radiology recommendations in above average risk women. So these two pieces, we were able to give access to hundreds of thousands of Missouri women And I'm so proud that we were able to do that. But now, with my role with the ACR RAN and RADPAC, I feel that I'm in a position where I can help others across all the states to pass this kind of legislation that's so important for our patients. So I'm just really fortunate to be in a position where I'm going to try to help as many people as I can who need that assistance.
So I would think that people listening to this would have a similar question that pops in their mind. But the one thing that comes to mind is, how did you know where to start? How did you figure out what to do when you realized that there was this issue that was very antiquated and not really being kept up to the standards that are acceptable for coverage? Like, where do you even begin? Like, I think for a lot of people, they would say, man, that sounds like something I would love to do, but that's kind of almost overwhelming. Like, how do I go from 0 to 100 and figure that all out? Like, where do I start?
Well, the first place you can start is you can contact your state radiological society, because odds are that state radiological society has worked on previous pieces of legislation and can help you kind of navigate how to undertake something like that in your state, because every state is so different and state dependent. So I would say reaching out to your state radiological society president or the board. Most state rad societies have a legislative committee like Missouri does. And that could be a great place to start to seek guidance. Because I said, again, a lot of states are very different. But if you're not sure who your contact is at the state level, the ACR government relations team, we have an incredible team where you can seek help. So we've got, staff from Eugenia Brent Crimer to Melody Ballesteros. We've got Ted Burns. We've got so many in our armamentarium that we can turn to and say, how do I get started? So, for example, when it came to the high-risk breast imaging legislation, I knew that these recommendations had come out from the ACR in 2018, and we started to recommend these things in our reports, but patients were calling and saying, like, this is all good and well, but I don't have any insurance coverage for this. I can't afford to pay for this out of pocket to what the extent is. So I reached out to our ACR government relations team, and I said, I need to know all the states that have passed this kind of legislation. I need the red states, I need the blue states. From there, they were able to get that information to me very, very quickly. And then from there, I had forged some connections with elected officials at the state level. And I met with the state senator over coffee. I presented the data to her. I presented to her which states had passed this legislation and some language of how we could potentially introduce this in the Missouri legislature. And then it took off from there. So you have so many resources at your fingertips. And I think sometimes we're so siloed when, we're just going about our day to day and not realizing the resources that are available to you, especially in this space when you're trying to get critical pieces of legislation passed.
I think that's great advice. I think obviously the ACR, selfishly, I think we do a pretty good job of being a resource. What types of model legislation exist? What are the pros and cons? What are the hurdles you'll face? Expanding the network into contacting other lobbyists from other states and other folks within the legislative initiatives is figure out, like, hey, how did this work for you guys and what can we learn from what you guys did? Is very invaluable, let alone, you already have so much on your plate, but they could probably reach out to you and say, hey, our state is kind of going through the same thing that your state went through. How do we go ahead and kind of move forward with what you guys did? So that's another resource. It's funny, we're here at RSNA, and this is going to sound a little callous, but I can't help but think this. So I'm on the elevator at the hotel. There's a bunch of people who are obviously here for RSNA, and they're talking about all these exhibit, visits that they're doing, and they're talking about all the equipment they're thinking about getting. And, I hear people talking about that at breakfast and at lunch and at dinner, and you see all these meetings. And I can't help but to think there's so many people in our space who are making so many really, really expensive decisions and have no clue what's happening legislatively. They have no idea that there could be a huge cut coming across, in the start of 2023. And it's just crazy to me to think, like, how do we break through? So, not being naive that everyone here would say, wow, we got these Medicare cuts, or, the tens of thousands of people who are here. But, like, it does seem kind of crazy that probably many more people don't know what's happening than people who do. And so, like, how do we how do we fix this decades of apathy that just kind of exists where like, hey, we're doing what we always do in radiology. We're buying the equipment, we're working hard. We're trying to do the best for our patients, but that's kind of all they do. And then hope that someone else kind of takes care of it or that the HR just gets it done on their behalf. How do we break into that to make it more of a culture, I guess?
Yes. So, I think this has been the $1 million question in our field. We know, for example, that 10% of radiology contributes to RADPAC, but 100% of the profession benefits. So, for us, I think it's really important to focus on pipeline creation. The earlier that I think that our future can be exposed to radiology political advocacy endeavors, the better. And we're starting to see that, we're starting to give grand rounds and lectures throughout the country to academic institutions and their radiology residency programs. There are radiology residency programs now talking about and formulating RADVOCACY curricula. So the earlier that these trainees can get exposed, the better. When it comes to the RAN, for example, too, we have such a robust infrastructure, particularly with our resident fellow section. Each residency program has a RAN leader. But now we've gone a step further to formulate what's called the pre-radiology RAN, which is devised of medical students and even unmatched medical students who will be reapplying for the match for radiology because they have expressed an ardent interest of radiology endeavors. So I think that, the earlier we can expose our trainees, we can expose our future so that it just becomes habit forming and it becomes a way of life. And just, again, they realize how important it is in comparison to their clinical day-to-day, arguably just as important. I think the better, because, I find a lot of radiologists who are maybe mid-career level and beyond that finally, start to take an interest in this stuff, say to me, gosh, I wish I would have gotten involved years ago. Like, you're so smart getting involved when you did as a first year resident, because the radiology political advocacy, it takes time. It really takes time to truly understand the issues, understand how relationships work, understand how all the processes work. So the earlier you can get involved, the better. So my hope is that going forward, we really start to expose our trainees to just everything that has to do with radiology political advocacy. And we're seeing a generation, an era of advocates and activists. We're seeing that with a lot of our younger leaders. So the earlier that we can get them involved, the better. And I do think that over time, this culture of apathy will change.
Well, I hope you're right. And I do think starting as early as you can is probably the best step forward that we can go through. And I love the fact that we're doing it with not just residents, but even those who aren't even in radiology yet. And we've had a lot of interest from a lot of those folks, which is great. We look at anesthesiologists as kind of a gold standard when it comes to, they have the highest amount of contribution dollars for PACs within the medical specialty organizations, and they're known for their grassroots as well. And that's something that they've been able to do successfully at the training levels. And it's become it's kind of the cost of doing business. It's the cost of doing practice. And I think creating that mindset is huge. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. We could probably talk about advocacy for another 4 hours. We might bore some people if we did that. So I don't want to spend all our time on that because you have some other pretty cool, exciting stuff that you do. We've known each other for a long time. And so it's been cool to kind of work together and know each other from the professional advocacy perspective, but also now personally, we know each other well. And if you know that my Philadelphia Eagles are doing well, you'll send me a text. And if I know that your Kansas City Chiefs are doing well, I'll send you a text and we'll say, hey, maybe they'll play in the Super Bowl or whatever the case may be. And I think football is probably one of the big ones. I'm a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan and you're a huge Kansas City Chiefs fan. We've talked a little bit about that in the beginning, about your roots to Kansas City and how deep they are. So it's pretty cool. I was just joking with you recently about the fact that I'll go to NFL.com and then I see your face on the website because you were just recently named the Kansas City Chiefs Fan of the Year. And it's crazy to me, like that's such a great honor. And it's probably the first time I've had to vote for something having to do with the NFL that's not for Philadelphia. I'm voting all the time for you instead of the Eagles Fan of the Year because of our relationship. But talk about that honor you just recently got, how that process came about, and kind of what's in store for that as you move forward.
Sure. So this summer, my husband actually nominated me for what's called the Lamar Hunt Legacy Honoree. And at each home game of the Chiefs, they recognize a community member who had an impact that exemplified the spirit and the community impact of Lamar Hunt, who is the founder of the Chiefs, played a huge role in getting the NFL started, as many of you know. And so we thought, it was probably going to be a stretch because there's so many people in the Kansas City community doing incredible things. But lo and behold, about 6 weeks later, I get a phone call from the Chiefs saying, "Congratulations, you're a finalist for the Lamar Hunt Legacy Honoree, and we have some questions to ask you." And so they asked me some questions for about 30 minutes in the middle of a crazy clinical work day. Everyone at my breast center, they're so supportive. They're like, go get interviewed. Like, we'll cover the patients, go. And so I did this interview, and then they said, "Okay, in 2 weeks, we'll let you know whether you were chosen or not." And then 2 weeks rolled around. I get a call saying, "Congratulations, you are one of the Lamar Hunt Legacy honorees, and we'd like to honor you at the home opener." Well, little did I know that behind the scenes, what was happening is that the Chiefs were selecting their 2022 Fan of the Year from the Lamar Hunt Legacy honorees. And the Fan of the Year campaign has started by the NFL. It was started in 2020, and each of the 32 teams pick a person from their community that A is a fanatical about their team, but B had some sort of community impact. So what was really incredible was I didn't know about the Fan of the Year until the home opener. So I was just thinking I was going to get recognized to be, for being the Lamar Hunt Legacy honoree. I was so honored. And so before the game, the Chiefs set us up in a private lot for a tailgate. We, set up all of our stuff for the tailgate, but they gave us access to this lot that we would otherwise never have access to. It's like super fancy, too fancy for us. There's just no way. But all of a sudden, we're on this lot and we're, having our barbecue and having a good time. I see NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell and CEO and Chairman Clark Hunt start walking this lot. And I think, wow, that's incredible, and I'm thinking, wow. And they started walking towards me. But honestly, I was thinking they're probably going to some group behind us that is way fancier than we are. I mean, we're just some, people here eating some Jack Stack barbecue and, we're nobodies. But I had some chief staff next to me say, "Get ready, they're coming to talk to you." I'm like, "What?" And I had like barbecue in my hands and I was like wiping down my hand because I had to shake their hands, of course. And they came up to me and they congratulated me for being the Lamar Hunt Legacy honoree. They congratulated me on and thanked me for everything I was doing in the Kansas City community for breast cancer care and access. Commissioner Goodell shared that his mother unfortunately passed from breast cancer, so breast cancer was very near and dear to his heart. And then Clark Hunt said that we have one more surprise for you. And they pulled out of a bag a jersey that had the number 22 on it and said Fan of the Year. He said, "In addition to being the Lamar Hunt Legacy honoree, the Chiefs have chosen you as the 2022 Fan of the Year. And you'll be competing against the other 31 teams in their Fan of the Year with the NFL Fan of the Year announced at the Super Bowl." So he said, "And we have another surprise for you. You'll be going to the Super Bowl." So that was pretty mind-blowing. And it was kind of like, when Oprah Winfrey used to have her show and she used to give gifts and everybody just started like going crazy. That's literally how I felt in that moment if I was ever going to feel that. And, just to be recognized for the work, not just my love of the Chiefs. I've loved them since I was born. I grew up in rural Missouri. Sports is life. Chiefs was life. But to be recognized for the work that I do and the impact that, I have been making, particularly in the Kansas City Metro, the state of Missouri, and nationally, is truly, truly an honor. I was the first physician chosen for this campaign. And to be a radiologist, I feel that I'm very proud of that. I'm trying to use this platform to get us out there, to tell people who we are, what we do as radiologists, the role we play in patient care, and of course, talk about breast cancer awareness and early detection. So it's been a pretty mind-blowing experience. I've got to do a lot of cool things thus far. I have cool things coming down the pike. I get to be in Sports Illustrated magazine, which is pretty cool. Each of the 32 fans have a jersey that say Fan of the Year. I'm in that, and get to go to the NFL honor ceremony. I mean, there's just so many really amazing things. So I couldn't be more appreciative. This was never on my radar, but I feel incredibly honored.
Well, so a couple things. One, and you know this, Amy, I've already told you if the Eagles go to the Super Bowl, your husband Joe has to stay home because I'm taking one of your tickets. And secondly, earlier this summer at the Kansas Radiological Society meeting, they had their chapter meeting at Arrowhead Stadium where the Kansas City Chiefs play. So I was able to go out there and speak to the chapter and then take in a little bit of the game. It was a preseason game, but I was like, even a preseason game, these fans are awesome. This atmosphere and environment's awesome. The community, you can just tell walking around the concourse, there's just a real sense of connectedness. Super cool experience for me because I've had heard for years and years how, Arrowhead's one of the loudest and one of the most energetic places to watch a football game. And to figure out the fact that of all those folks who are so passionate that you were chosen as the fan of the year. That's a pretty big honor, and that's really cool. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So we're going to finish with our usual lightning round, where we try to, again, get a more personal glimpse into what makes Amy Patel. So we start with favorite food.
My favorite food would be a good filet. I mean, I was born and raised in rural Missouri, and a grilled filet is definitely my favorite food of choice.
All right. Can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
Travel, favorite place to go?
Lake Como, Italy. My now husband and I went to Lake Como in September of 2019, and it was the most magical place on earth and had the best time of our lives. It's so beautiful. We did not see George Clooney there, unfortunately, but it's just an incredible place. The food, the people, just the sights. It's amazing.
So this one's going to be hard for you. Favorite hobby that's not advocacy, and let's say that's not even Kansas City Chiefs, which just takes your two top stuff off the list. But what's your favorite thing to do, favorite hobby activity?
Well, some people know this about me, some people don't. But if I didn't go to medical school, I would have been a vocal music major. I sing, so I take voice lessons still. Have been taking them from the same lady who I took voice lessons from as a medical student when she was on faculty at the conservatory at University of Missouri, Kansas City. She's now since retired, but gives lessons at her home. So I still do lessons with her. She's going to be retiring though next month, so I'm going to have to find somebody else. But voice lessons, I try to continue with that. It's a great stress reliever. It takes me to another place. Music was a huge part of my life growing up, instrumental and vocal. So some people know that about me, some don't, but I really enjoy that aspect and the fine arts.
Well, and just a side note, anyone who goes to our RADPAC reception at RSNA may remember a few years ago, just before COVID, we had our event at a karaoke bar. And for those who were at that karaoke bar, they know that not only does Amy enjoy singing, but she's also very good at singing. And if there was a competition that night, she easily would have won. So that does not surprise me. I was kind of thinking you might have said tennis, because I know that you were a huge tennis player back in the day. I don't know if you still do tennis.
Yeah, but I do tennis, but gosh, these days it's been a little crazy. I've actually picked up golf during COVID. My husband's an avid golfer, and we joined a club and all that. And I actually enjoy golf. Like that's, I've always gone to some tournaments here and there with my dad, but never played because in high school, golf was the same season as tennis, and I played tennis. So I've picked up golf these last few years, and I'm really enjoying that. And it's just something fun for my husband and I to do together.
Very cool. And then we'll close with favorite saying, favorite quote. This can be, something that's well known, that's renowned. Could be just your own little saying. For instance, in our household, it's not anyone else's favorite saying but mine, but it's my favorite saying in our house. I just say Nike. My kid asked me to if they can do something, I just say Nike, just do it. So that's kind of something we're looking for from you. If you have a particular favorite quote or favorite saying you'd like to use.
Yes, so I actually have a quote on my website, dramykpatel.com, and that is a website where I share things that I do. I provide, educational materials to patients, not just in the Kansas City Metro, but just all over the country. And it's a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, and she says that you can gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You are able to say to yourself, I lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. For patients who are facing breast cancer, it's important for those of you who are listening to know that as much as I wear a lot of hats and I have a lot of roles, at the end of the day, I am a breast radiologist and my patients come first. And I want to always be there for my patients and want them to know that they're supported by me and my team and that we will get them through anything. And so I think that this quote applies not just to my patients who are facing breast cancer, but also to those of us who are embarking on new journeys and ways that we never thought we would. Specifically women in radiology I'm a huge advocate in the women in radiology space. I'll be also incoming president of the American Association for Women in Radiology. And historically, we have been afraid to step up and do things because the opportunities just weren't there. And so I think that this quote gives me a lot of inspiration. I have a lot of hope for the future. I think we have everything in place now to move forward as women leaders in radiology. And so that quote, I think, speaks to me on so many levels when it comes to a personal level, but also a professional level with my patients.
I got to tell you, when I just stop and think about all the things you're doing, I get tired, and it's not even like stuff I'm doing, the stuff you're doing. And I'm like, man, how can I do the stuff I need to do? Just thinking about all the stuff that she's doing. Like, it's almost like, I don't want to say it's intimidating, but it's like, it's pretty awe-inspiring, to be quite honest. Clearly you have a problem with saying the word no, and that you are asked to do something, you will jump in. And that's something that I know Dr. Steve Farrar used to always say. He says, you know what? If you want to really make a difference, always say yes. No matter what, say yes. You'll figure it out. You'll find a way. You'll find the time, and you'll never regret it. So I think that kind of really epitomizes my view of you. Tell us real quick before we end, how do they vote for you on the NFL website? I think it's NFL.com fan.
Yeah, if you go to NFL.com, there's a section for Fan of the Year, and you'll see the 32 fans of the year that are listed there. You can also, if you check out my social media, my handle on Twitter is at Amy K. Patel, as well. And on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm constantly sharing the link. If you go to my website, the first thing that pops up is a link to the NFL website to vote. So it is everywhere, and I'd really appreciate everybody's support because I definitely want to win this thing, not just for Chiefs Kingdom, but really the House of Medicine and, of course, the House of Radiology.
And just one last shameless plug about this. You can vote an unlimited amount of times. I have voted about as many times as I spend time on TikTok. So that's a lot. Hours I've spent voting, and I know a lot of your friends and colleagues have done so as well for you. So, we wish you all the best. Thank you so much for this podcast time, and we look forward to all that you're going to do with RAN and with RADPAC moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.